Few cityscapes are more recognizable or more beloved than New York City. But something even many lifelong New Yorkers don't know is that there is a full-to-scale model of the entire city right in their own backyard. It's the largest and most detailed model of any city ever built, requiring over 100 full-time workers and years of painstaking effort. Not only is it accurate down to the last building and street corner, but it's also a time machine. The model was last updated in 1992, offering a precise window into the past. It's nostalgic for longtime residents, surprising in both its differences and its similarities to present day, and full of ghostly revelations about the city and the world that once was. Tonight on Looking For, we'll shrink down to 1/1200th of our normal size and take a walk through the streets of New York City in the early 90s. Uncovering the remarkable work behind the world's largest architectural model and gaining a unique insight into what life for New Yorkers was like in 1992. Welcome to the Panorama of the City of New York. Although today it depicts the city as it was on January 1st, 1992, the world's largest architectural model was actually first built in the early 1960s. The project was commissioned by the New York City Board of Estimate in June 1961, with the aim of creating an exhibit for the upcoming World's Fair, which was to be held in Queens in 1964. The president of the 1964 World's Fair Corporation, Robert Moses, led the initiative, opting to award the contract to a firm that specialized in constructing architectural models, called Raymond Lester Associates. The Board of Estimate could not have asked for a better firm. Raymond Lester Associates had already established a rich history of creating detailed scale models. Most were for construction and planning purposes, but the firm had even worked on an attraction for a fair before. Back in 1939 and 1940, Raymond Lester Associates collaborated with industrial designer Norma Bell Geddes as part of the previous New York World's Fair. But this new project would be a step above and beyond anything Raymond Lester Associates, or any other model building firm for that matter, had ever created before. The task was simple in concept, but highly complex and unprecedented in implementation. A scale model of New York City, even back in 1961, would involve hundreds of thousands of buildings. And Robert Moses, the man who spearheaded the project, was not content to simply fill in the space. In addition to every single noteworthy landmark, from the Chrysler Building to the Statue of Liberty to the Empire State Building and beyond, it was insisted that every single street and every single structure, however nondescript, be accurately included in the model. After some careful calculations, it was determined that the city should be recreated at a 1/1200 scale. This would mean that 100 feet in the real city would be 1 inch on the model, or every 30 meters would be roughly 2.5 centimeters. And of course, that would be true both horizontally and vertically, as every individual building would have to be built to scale too. For example, the Empire State Building, which in real life stands 443 meters, would have to be 36.9 centimeters tall in the model. Central Park, the iconic rectangular oasis of green in the middle of the dense metropolis, is in reality about 3.4 square kilometers, stretching 4 kilometers long and 0.8 kilometers wide. Therefore, for it to be accurate in the model, the park would have to be just over 66 centimeters wide and 3.33 meters long. As you can imagine, this started to add up pretty quickly. And even though designers were recreating the city at a minuscule fraction of its real size, they still ended up needing a huge amount of total floor space. The real New York City, meaning everything inside the city limits, including all 5 boroughs, is 783 square kilometers of land. To recreate this, the model builders had to connect 273 panels, each around 1.2 meters by 3 meters. According to the Queens Museum, the result is a total area of 867.25 square meters, just over 4 full tennis courts. The model reportedly cost $672,000 to make. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $6.8 million today. Before they could even get to building, a team had to conduct extensive aerial photography, reference whatever maps they could find, and use good old direct observation to draw up what is likely the most spatially precise and detailed blueprint of any city ever drawn. Next, a team of 100 craftsmen had to spend 3 years off-site in the city of West Nyack. Approximately 100,000 of the models were made by hand, while some 25,000 of the larger pieces were fashioned out of plexiglass. For smaller items like boats in New York Harbor or planes parked at JFK International, creators resorted to wood, plastic, and even hand-painted paper. Most of the buildings, sprawling across the 5 boroughs, are made from wood and acrylic. Even the topography of the city was recreated, using layers of foam and wood supported by 497 legs made from steel. The Panorama was even given its own party piece to really wow fairgoers in 1964. For the agreeable price of just 10 cents, visitors could enjoy a simulated helicopter ride over the model city. Sleek plastic gondolas, each made to look like the inside of a helicopter cabin, would travel silently along a guided track along the perimeter of the Panorama, creating the illusion of flying over New York City at between 1 kilometer and 6 kilometers high. As always, the illusion was carefully crafted to scale. Riders were actually looking down from between about 80 centimeters to about 5 meters. Of course, this is technically much higher than a real helicopter would fly over the real New York. But it would seem visitors during the 1964 World's Fair were so taken by the experience, they happily overlooked this one embellishment. Although it lasted just 9 minutes from start to finish, the simulated helicopter ride attracted an average of 1,400 people per day, making it among the most popular attractions at the entire fair. Sadly, due to wear and tear and evolving exhibit designs, the simulated helicopter ride is no longer part of the experience. However, you can still stroll along a walkway that traces its former path, viewing the model from the same simulated altitude. But even from that high vantage point, there is one thing you won't see in the Panorama of New York City, and that is people. After all, they would have been quite small. The average adult male would barely scratch 1.5 millimeters inside the scale model. Individual people would be roughly like single grains of couscous or quinoa. And that's why, unsurprisingly, the builders didn't include them. However, if they had, their original model completed in 1964 would have contained between 7.5 and 8 million people. That's about 20 kilograms of quinoa, enough to fill a medium-sized suitcase. But even though the population would decline slightly in the ensuing decades, the skyline would only grow. In 1973, less than a decade after the model made its World's Fair debut, real-life architects in Manhattan completed what was then the tallest building in the world. And what's more, they built it twice. The World Trade Center was a complex of 7 buildings, providing office space for 35,000 people working at 430 different companies. Many more people, some 70,000, flooded the premises every day, most of them eager to see Buildings 1 and 2, which rose approximately 417 meters towards the sky. With the help of its antenna, the North Tower technically rose to a full 527 meters. Both were taller in body than the previous record holder, the Empire State Building, and thanks to the antenna, they could also claim to outstretch even the Empire State Building's famous spire. In the ensuing decades, countless other buildings were added to the city skyline, although the World Trade Center was undoubtedly the most significant and recognizable. In 1992, as the Panorama approached its 30th birthday, a major renovation was planned. The work was colossal. The Panorama used to be lit up by over 3,000 tiny colored light bulbs that needed to be manually unscrewed each time one needed to be replaced. Over 60,000 new buildings would be added to reflect the changing city, including the Twin Towers, whose antenna tip would stand at 44 centimeters in the model. The renovation would cost an additional $2 million, or about $4.5 million today. And the model is also expensive to maintain. To preserve the appearance of the 895,000 replicas of buildings, from private homes to skyscrapers, museums and churches, the model has to be thoroughly cleaned twice a year. To finance the museum's efforts, a long-running program allows visitors to adopt a piece of the model, whether that is their apartment building, a restaurant, a park, or any feature that speaks to them. By paying a yearly rent or donation to the museum, they can receive a deed to owning a property on the model. In 1992, New York City had approximately 7.4 million residents. It was then, as it was before and as it remains now, the largest city in the United States. But its reputation was not entirely glorious. In the mid-1970s, the city had nearly gone bankrupt. Banks eventually lost faith in the city's ability to pay back its growing debts. And the city responded by cutting wages and services, raising transit fares, freezing hiring, and even charging tuition for city colleges. The city was ravaged by the crack epidemic in the 1980s, becoming one of the most dangerous cities in the country and reaching a historic peak for violent crime. As the 90s rolled around, New York was on the brink of a major economic transformation, to be accompanied by plummeting, almost magically disappearing crime rates. But New Yorkers in 1992 didn't know it quite yet. Amid the continuing grittiness that had characterized the New York of the 1980s, New York in 1992 was nevertheless an epicenter for contemporary American culture. Hip-hop was booming, thanks to artists like Nas, Biggie Smalls, and Wu-Tang Clan. Street performers were common throughout the city's famous subway system, and subway riders still had to pay their fares with tokens. Metro cards would not be introduced until just 1 year later. Back then, riding the subway cost $1.25. Today, it costs nearly $3. Renting an apartment might have cost $500 or $600 in 1992, whereas in 2025, it costs an average of over $3,500. And what about the skyline itself, which casts so many shadows over this unique period in New York City history? Even though 1992 doesn't seem like that long ago, the movie Home Alone 2 depicts New York at almost precisely the same time as the model. It's surprising how much the skyline has changed since then. Midtown Manhattan has grown dramatically. The Empire State and Chrysler buildings are now surrounded on all sides by other super talls, several of which are even taller. 1 Vanderbilt, 30 Hudson Yards, the JP Morgan Chase building, and the controversial 432 Park Ave were all completed in the last decade. Central Park Tower is now the tallest residential building in the world. Steinway Tower, just down the block on West 57th Street, is the second tallest residential building in the world, as well as the narrowest skyscraper ever constructed, dashing the hopes of its rival 432 Park Ave when it was completed in 2021. None of these new skyscrapers are in the panorama of New York City. But the most notable difference, as I'm sure you've already guessed, is the World Trade Center. The model was last updated 9 years before the tragedy in 2001. Had they moved to renovate the model between 2001 and 2013, they would have simply removed the 2 towers from the panorama, leaving a ghostly absence. However, since 2014, the site is now home to One World Trade Center, the 8th tallest building in the world, and the tallest anywhere outside of Asia. At 541 meters, it is 14 meters taller than its former iteration. None of these updates have happened, however, and the panorama remains a unique time capsule. One reason, according to the Assistant Director of Archives and Collections at the Queen's Museum, Lynn Malashevsky, is that there have been so many structural additions to the city since 1992 that the labor and financial resources required would be, quote, unparalleled. Another more bittersweet reason is that, according to Malashevsky, skilled model makers are becoming increasingly rare in the age of digital modeling, which uses handmade models far less often. Thus, in this sense too, the panorama of New York City remains frozen in time. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time for more stories on Looking For.